Esainai el heharim, me'ayin yavo Ezri, me'im Adonai, Ose shamayim va'aretz. Ezri, me'im Adonai, Ose shamayim va'aretz. Al yitain lamod raglecha, al yanum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum velo yishan, shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha yad yeminecha. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha al yad yeminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, ve'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikora, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam. Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam. Al mekoma tavo v'shalom. Thank you to everyone who is tuning in to today's service. We wish we could all be together in the same physical space, because we know that when it comes to healing, that would help. But we are still so thankful we have the power of technology today to keep us connected, even when we remain physically distanced. After all, keeping people connected was what Susan Halprin Klein was all about. Her love of people was truly extraordinary. And today, from all over the world, those people are returning the favor, sending their love from wherever they are, joining their hearts together to give comfort and strength to Susan's family who are here. We are here today to remember, to honor and celebrate, and to say goodbye to Susan Lori Halprin Klein, Sarah Leah Ruvain Ve'eli Naomi, the daughter of Kenneth and Elise. Susan passed away yesterday morning, the 16th day in the Hebrew month of Iyar. She was 67. She will be lovingly missed by her husband Brian, her mother Elise, her brother David and sister-in-law Linda, her 3 daughters, Bailey, Sari, and Julie, and 3 sons-in-law, Dan, Scott, and Alan. Her 3 grandchildren, Lila B., Asher, and Miles. By dear cousins, by many adopted family members, and by a tremendous group of friends. Susan was predeceased by her father Kenneth and by her sister Tracy, Zichronam Livracha, of blessed memory. Sadly, we've known this day was coming. Susan has been battling cancer for 7 years, fighting with unbelievable strength and determination, refusing to give up any of her soul, any of her essence along the way. Through it all, she remained thoughtful, selfless, and generous. In typical Susan fashion, always putting the needs of others ahead of her own. Focusing always on the people around her instead of herself. But she suffered, and her family has suffered, watching her fight so courageously. There is no fairness and nothing right about a woman cut down in her prime by a terrible disease, with so much more life to live and so much more love to give. There is no way to make sense of such a loss and the horrible pain and sadness that comes with it. But if there ever was a person who we can honestly say got as much out of life as she possibly could, who squeezed out every last drop, who stands today and will always stand as a shining example of what it means to make every day count, that is Susan. A friend of mine recently sent me a quote. It was intended for a different purpose, but when it arrived, I couldn't help but feel it was meant for Susan. It's a quote from the renowned American writer and thinker Ralph Waldo Emerson. Enthusiasm is one of the most powerful engines of success. When you do a thing, do it with all your might. Put your whole soul into it. Stamp it with your own personality. Be active. Be energetic, be enthusiastic and faithful, and you will accomplish your object. Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. Susan Halprin lived and breathed enthusiasm. I knew her. I'm proud to say I knew her. And I know, like everyone who's here and everyone who is watching, that she had an energy and an intensity she brought to everything she touched in her life. A woman of tremendous integrity, non-judgmental, truly accepting. She was one of a kind. Her creativity, her individuality. Not only was Susan not afraid to take risks, not afraid to stand out, but it was her mission. Her sense of style and taste, her eye, her love of color, and the way she used it to decorate her home, her cottage, even herself. It all traced back to her strong belief that one should stand out. But really, the reason she stood out from all of us is because of how she treated all of us. Above and beyond would be one way to put it. The consummate hostess and entertainer, the most inclusive person you've ever met. An uncanny ability she had to strike up a rapport with anyone, to turn strangers into dear friends over the course of a quick conversation. And then she would maintain that friendship forever. When it comes to Susan, there are stories. Oh, there are stories. Like her daughters coming home to discover an incredible feast packed up in boxes on the kitchen counter. What? The food's not for us? No, it's for so-and-so. I need to go and drop it off right now. So what's for dinner? Oh, I didn't make any dinner. Or the one time on a Saturday morning at synagogue when she noticed some new families who had just arrived to Winnipeg from Argentina. The next thing you knew, there were 15 extra people at the Klein house for the Pesach Seder a week later. She knew her mailman by name, and he got a signature cookie brittle every year on his birthday and also at Christmas. Just make sure you bring back the tin. She had the personal cell phone number for the florist at Costco. She was the only person for whom Miller's Meats would break their rule and let her order over the phone. And just this last week, just days ago, sick and dying in bed at home, she remembered a friend whose wife has been stuck in Toronto during the pandemic, who's all alone, and she insisted he come over for dinner. He can't come in the house? That's okay. He'll stand in the yard and we'll pass him food through the window and he can stand there and eat it and maybe we'll all still be able to see each other. That story may capture her the best, but they all capture her the best. And now it's my honor to hand things over to people who knew Susan the best. Her cousin and dear friend Carrie will speak. Her daughters, Sari and Bailey, will speak, as will her husband, Brian, as they offer eulogies that capture her essence and remind us, as if we could ever forget, why we feel so sad to lose her and to mourn her today. Carrie?
Today, however melancholy, of eulogizing, my dear Susan. Despite inhabiting the reality of her illness for so long, its real manifestation is nevertheless now filled with shock, grief, and a growing horror of how we can possibly manage without her. We were first cousins, just 9 months apart, but the seeds of closeness were planted long ago, first in childhood as playmates, and later indelibly cemented in our pre- and teenage years by endless summers and sleepovers in the front guest room of our grandparents' Winnipeg Beach cottage. Over time, this attachment, this love we shared, intensified, and we traversed the comfort of that bond until today, without conflict or any kind between us, rejoicing deeply in each other's lives, but also filling the holes left by other relatives lost to death or circumstance. I can flip through my mental scrapbook of our lives together, past Passover cooking marathons and often protracted trips to Costco, past amazing 65th birthday parties we hosted for one another, past travels we shared in New York, the Carolinas, Vienna, Florida, California, past the births of children, past fixing her up with Brian, who Richard and I met lecturing at law school, past her life in Minneapolis, past a girls' trip we finagled our grandparents to finance when we were both just newlyweds, past teaching her to drive in the Gamble's parking lot on Grant Avenue, past ghostwriting her English Lit assignment and, in spite of my supposed brilliance, earning a disappointing D, to her bat mitzvah trip, a special treat from our grandparents, to visit in Los Angeles, where my family was living at the time, past locking up our dog Nikki in the basement where I grew up on Campbell Street to appease her dreadful fear of dogs, to her fabulous childhood birthday parties on Ash Street, and other special times there, where first, second, and kissing Halprin, Diner, and Samuel's cousins played and jostled like a pack of wildlings whenever a birthday party, holiday dinner, or Seder allowed. While I am known to treasure the virtues of solitude, she was wired to be gregarious. She was energized by social interaction and networking, ringing phones and doorbells, At home, she nurtured a warm and fuzzy yet chaotic reality. Though she found joy, magic, and meaning in flowers, nature, the out-of-doors, fashion, and design, she didn't have to have things. In that respect, she often seemed unique in a sea of us, mostly consumed by the impact of material possessions. But she had not an ounce of pretense in her. Like our grandmother Ray Halprin, she was a passionate and early recycler. Hume milk cartons packed with biscotti or margarine boxes jammed with cookie brittle, she abhorred wastefulness. She had a visual acuity for the tiniest detail, and she excelled at appreciating the smallest of things. She never underestimated the effect of social interaction. She was both authentic and unconventional. Excuse me. How we spend our days is how we spend our lives. And if the meaning of life is to give life meaning, she did that every day in every way. Her commitment to Judaism, to her parents, Elise and Ken, to her own family and its various rituals, the birthday trips to New York for each of the girls as they turned 13 and 16, the special birthday jewelry at 21 and 30, dates to the symphony, and most reliably, Shabbat dinners. She never lived passively. Not unlike the cookie brittle she baked, and which came to be her calling card, she crackled with sweetness, goodness, and life as she taught first Brian, her 3 girls, and later 3 grandchildren, curiosity, kindness, love, joie de vivre, and to look squarely at what matters. Hers was an aptitude for appreciating life. Cooking, of course, was her passion. Cooking was like breathing. In the years of her illness, it was a coping strategy. It quieted her mind. Time went quickly, and she lost herself in it, but it had always filled her with happiness to cook and entertain her family and others. And I suspect there is hardly one among us mourning her today who can't claim to have been recruited to help in some marathon cooking bee or to sit at her Shabbat table. It wasn't just she needed our help to make her ginger biscotti, her challah, or her cheese muffins. We needed her just as much. In fact, she provided a haven, a safe place to come. Her door was always open, and however lonely or at loose ends, we were assured of always being welcome. She let people in, and we were the better for it. If there was a need, an illness, a sadness, she'd fill it. Over the years, extending her largesse to so many friends, taking people into her ever-expanding circle, extending her largesse as the situation required. 12 or more years ago, my father suffered an extended delirium following knee surgery, and I was called to Vancouver. Throughout that long, hard period, our phones barely rang, but my mother and I could count on Susan to call us every morning and every evening, checking in on him, of course, but mostly on us to see how we were managing, and I doubt we could have managed without that incredible show of support and welcome diversion. And then, once he stabilized and we were able to relocate him to Winnipeg, she moved on to others. She had empathy for whatever, medical or marital, ailed you, and she'd take people into her orbit and help them when they were down and needed it most. In this way, she surrounded herself with a rich, ever-expanding web of remarkably giving, mostly but not exclusively, women friends, both young and old. She wasn't just grateful for a charmed life. She had a happy energy, and she shared it generously. Just like when she found a good recipe, she shared it rather than hoarded it. My goodness, you didn't even have to ask for it. If it was a winner, it simply appeared in your inbox. And what was true at her table extended well beyond as she connected people with information and with each other. An early childhood educator, that occupation must surely have been her calling. So many of us can boast a relationship she had with her grandchildren. Even I found it remarkable how, with my own 3 living in New York, she was nevertheless able to connect with them, even across so many miles. I recall with astonishment the day my grandson Max, then barely 6, interrupted 5 precious minutes of game playing on my iPhone to answer a FaceTime call from Auntie Susan. She alone holds that distinction. But let me not forget strangers. If she didn't host every foreign student in each of the girls' classes at Balmoral Hall, believe me, it wasn't for lack of trying. She was without a doubt the most inclusive person I have known. One encounter encapsulates her best. We were at the Splash Pad Playground in River Heights, in a veritable sea of parents and kids on the swings, in the sandbox, on benches, but only Susan approached the father with the white cane to see if he needed help playing with his young daughter. And when the time came, in the face of adversity, she showed us what she was really made of. For most people, the world narrows to a slit when facing a terminal diagnosis. Sudden, very little matters. But as was always her way, she plunged ahead, reinventing what her life looked like, still making every day count. She moved through the stages of her illness, defying the odds and injustices with the most amazing grit, grace, and energy. So much so, in fact, many of us came to see her as indefatigable, our very own unsinkable Molly Brown. But on the eve of the 7th year, as the volume of her life inevitably lowered, this magical thinking gave way to harsh reality. Watching Susan in the palliative stage of her illness was no death watch, however. In fact, she couldn't have been more vibrant, more authentically herself, spirited and fun, precise, demanding, and of course caring, proved by the fact that each caregiver in turn came to appreciate and love her as well as we did. Ever the fulcrum of the family, she continued to direct them, though now from her bedroom, still running for mayor, or as Richard said, not unlike Al Capone, directing the organization from jail. Brian was often dispatched to make deliveries, bring chicken soup to a sick friend, send cards of condolence, thank yous, and above all, make sure Elise was cared for. Shabbat dinners continued almost religiously, even when she could no longer muster the strength to join everyone in the kitchen or dining room. With Brian and those wonderful girls acting as her surrogates, she organized menus, ordered the meat, and directed that invitations be extended to people privileged to visit her in her room, but who inevitably and sadly dined in the kitchen below as she rested. Yet she maintained her remarkable absence of vanity, and was always her way, let people in, creating community even as she was dying. By April, she was in a world of pain she had every right to be shielded from, steadfastly enduring injustices that brought others of us to our knees. Those able to be there, sometimes only virtually, had a touching up-close portrait as this most loving and remarkable family protected and wrapped her in a mantle of affection. It is a low point for me not to have been more present in those trying last days. Thankfully, Brian made certain she remained at home, his gift, managing a level of care previously reserved only for royalty. And the girls? Well, the girls, as close as 4 human beings could possibly be, smothered their mother in kisses and comfort, regularly massaging her face and temples, feeding, washing, caring, and ministering to her. Supported by Daniel, Scott, and Alan, 3 extraordinarily devoted and loving husbands, under extraordinarily difficult circumstances, they stopped at nothing, their outpouring of love clearly without bottom. One day, I swear on FaceTime, I saw all 3 girls and Max and Miles together with their mother in a single hospital bed. Of course, it was Susan who had taught and guided them, as well as could tell of others, both family and friends, in lessons of old-fashioned affection, tenderness, and friendship. and while her joyful essence will surely live on in her children and grandchildren, I don't know how I will manage, but for the circle of love, of family and friendship she collected. Raffi may have sung it to the children, but it turns out your friends are my friends, and my friends are your friends, and that's how she must have intended it to be. We were meant to hold each other after she was gone. Susan, you were the brightest constellation in my orbit, my dearest friend, my personal Wikipedia, and more, but beyond that even, you protected and loved me in a way I will never have again. I will miss you every day, and you will always be a handprint on my heart. Let me conclude with these lines from the song For Good, from the musical Wicked. It's when the two lead characters part and acknowledge they may never see one another again. Together, they sing, I do believe I have been changed for the better, and because I knew you, I have been changed for good.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Your words of eulogy are so beautiful and so fitting. Brian's coming.
I don't know if I'm going to get through this, but try. Some of you know the story of how I met Susan. And I know the date because the next day I was going to Montreal to the tax conference. It was November 21, 1979, a Saturday. And Carrie and Richard invited me for dinner. They were students of mine at the law school, and they invited me for dinner. I thought that was great. Came to the house on Brock Street. There was this lovely lady sitting in a tight blue dress, quiet, didn't say a word almost the entire night. Skinny, didn't say a word. And I had dinner, and I went home. The next day I went to Montreal, and I knew I was going away. I was going to the Far East in January. Didn't see her. And then in August of the following summer, I went with Gordon Kay to Bogart's, and on the dance floor, this lovely lady walked up to me and said, "Aren't you Brian Klein?" And I said, "Who are you?" And that was Susan. And we danced the night away, and that was the beginning of our relationship. Didn't take her home. I didn't see her again for a couple weeks. But I wanted to see her. I got up one morning, I said, I've got to see that woman again. And I phoned the man who became my father-in-law, Kay, and I asked him if he could give me her phone number in Minneapolis. And he said he didn't have it, which I know now that the Halprin family are deeply connected to the telephone, and somewhere there was a phone number. Anyway, I phoned her. She invited me, once again, inclusive. She was happy to hear from me. She invited me for Rosh Hashanah to her parents' home in a couple of weeks. She said she'll come. She ended up phoning me. I went over there, and the rest is history. We went out. We had wonderful times. We had many visits between Winnipeg and Minneapolis. We went to Florida. We had a wonderful time. Eventually, I persuaded Susan to move in with me again. I remember the date, June 1st, 1981. She moved into my house on Girton Boulevard, and of course, cleaned it from stem to stern. It needed it. And she spent quite a bit of time cleaning it. She also renovated it a bit just to improve things to her standard. And then we had a wonderful time. And she taught me so many things, like what a lychee nut was, or kiwi, or mango. We didn't have mango in Kelvington. And she was fantastic. It was quite a new life. Fabulous entertaining. And eventually we started going to Lake of the Woods. It was somewhere where neither of us had any basis, pre-history. We went to Lake of the Woods. We rented a cottage next to Sylvan and Yvonne for a couple of years. And then we had another cottage further down. And then we rented one in Mackenzie Portage Road. Eventually, what's that? She gave me the hook. Eventually, we had our own cottage, and the cottage became the center point of all the fun and excitement of having our three daughters. And the years went by, and we had a fabulous time together. Tremendous times at the lake. That's all I can say. Susan was my biggest supporter and fan, and she was also my biggest critic. She kept me well fed, well clothed, always smiling. Thank you. She was the glue that held my life and all our family together. She was stubborn, determined, and tenacious. She had eagle eyes and could spot a piece of fluff, a misplaced hair, or a loose thread from a mile away. She had a highest sense of integrity and of legality, if it was legal or if you had to do the right thing. You had to do the correct thing. She treated everyone with dignity. She had a heart of gold and would never seek praise or acknowledgement for the selfless acts she so often did. She held her family and loved ones to high standards and had a resolute moral compass. She was not afraid to tell us, her family, when we fell below her standard. She would remind me of the slightest things, like who to call, who I haven't seen lately. Have you spoken to so-and-so? That went on forever. Susan had, as you've been told, an art of connecting people for greater good. She was a fabulous entertainer, a great eye for design. She had the hands of an artist and was able to create a beautiful tablescape for all our dinners, birthday parties, and celebrations. Our Yontif dinners and birthday parties for each member of our family and daughters' weddings, they were spectacular. Her mother, Elise, inspired her to be a homemaker of the highest order. She had a sense of class, always looking out for the best interests of others in a very selfless way. She was a Gita Neshama, and has instilled that in each of our daughters, which they now demonstrate every day. In March of 2013, Susan was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. The news was heavy and devastating. We thought our lives were coming to an end. But in many ways, our new lives were just starting. Susan showed a brave and resolute determination not to be defeated by this horrible disease. Over the following years, she endured countless rounds of chemotherapy and radical surgery. When one treatment option failed, she continued to say yes to the next option to continue her fight. She received tremendous support from her team of providers at Cancer Care Manitoba, led by Dr. Alon Altman, with whom she had a great affinity and for whom great affection, and it was vice versa. The family would like to acknowledge the involvement of her amazing friends who played an integral role in her battle, always offering to cook, schlep, hold hands, rub her back, drive to and from blood work and port flushes, join in for the chemo sessions, going to CAT scans, answering FaceTime calls at all hours, wrote her cards and lifted her spirits. The family could not have done it with all of you. It was utterly amazing to see all her friends rally around her during this terrible time, a chance for her to be the receiver instead of the giver. Despite the horrible shadow looming in the distance, Susan continued her fight. She was especially driven by her 3 beautiful grandchildren, determined to be a part of their life. Just last week, Bailey was discussing with 6-year-old Lila B, that her bubby Sue wasn't going to live for much longer. Bailey explained it so well. She said to her, Bubby wants to fight so badly, but her body just won't let her. Finally, and to conclude, I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to thank all of her wonderful caregivers, Perlita, Kate, Sonia, Neneth, Nancy, Irene, and Nini. Also, Manitoba Palliative Care, Jen, Susan's nurse who made regular visits, and all the many doctors at Cancer Care Manitoba and the Health Sciences Center who looked after Susan with care and compassion over the past 7 years. All these people helped our family and Susan fight to extend her life and live the way she wanted. She loved you all, and I'll love you forever, Susan. Thank you.
I was laying in bed with my mom before dinner, and I could tell she had something to say. This was one of the last conversations that we had together, and it was a few weeks ago. It was difficult to fully understand her, as her train of thought was not continuous. She said, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, followed by something to the effect of, life goes by so fast when you go day by day. It's hard to appreciate everything in a day when you are so busy. I love you. I love Julie. I love Bailey. I love Daddy. I love Grandma. It's the best feeling. I've told you this before. Laying in the hospital bed as a family. Laying in the hospital bed as a family for the first time. We were both crying. I wiped the tears from her face with her dishcloth she keeps at the cart beside her bed. You know you are the sensitive one, she said to me. Bailey says, I love you. I can't live without you. And she said, you can and you will live without me. I told her that we look for guidance from her for everything we do. We don't know how we will live without her. We are constantly looking for her approval, and she told me she thinks I'm a perfectionist. I told her I love her. I don't know what we'll do without her. I told her she had 2 chin hairs, and she couldn't believe we didn't do anything about it. I found tweezers and took them out. She said she wanted Nanette to come clean her up right away and then have dinner that the Lipkins brought over. She insisted Dad call Scott, and she told him she really wanted him to be there. And everything continued. We gathered around my mom's bed and watched her eat dinner after we had ours in the kitchen. I felt like she had more to say. She wanted to make sure we all know how much she loves us. She said it was sad, really, to think about what she was telling me before. I've never talked to my mom like this before. She didn't show her emotions on her sleeve. I love her so much, and I know she was not ready to leave us.
from Lila B this morning she made with Julie. These are the words she used to describe Bubby. Talkative, fun, happy, special, beautiful, and kind. Places we went together. New York City, Bubby's and Two's, The Cottage, Winnipeg Beach, Broadway and NYC, Joey Coffee, Florida, the Children's Park, Swindon Park. She took me to her friends' houses to visit Gigi's condo. Special things we did together. Bake challah, bake cookie, brittle, Kabbalat, Shabbat, FaceTime all the time. Morning calls on the way to school, Springers, yin yoga at the Rady, my school, shopping at Joe Fresh on sale. Things she cooked that I loved. Brisket, cookie, brittle challah, chicken. Silly things she did to make me smile. Hide under the sheets when I would come into her bedroom. Tickle me. Tease Zadie. Play with me. Sing rhymes and songs. She read me books. Put me to sleep sometimes. Give me lots of hugs and kisses and cuddles. Where to begin with my mum? Over the past few months, thoughts of this day lingered through my mind and I fought to push them away. What month would it be? Late fall turned into winter, winter into spring. What would I say? Now that time has come and I am confounded with the fact that we are seemingly in shock with her passing. I feel exhausted. The words and memories do not flow eloquently into a eulogy. They come in waves, sometimes like tidal waves, like the grief we're experiencing. The loss of my mom after a long, courageous battle with cancer is heartbreaking. Her loss leaves not a hole, but a crater. Such a void. How can I begin to describe the life of my beautiful mother? We've been overwhelmed in the best way with messages and phone calls of love and support. The describing words are all the same. She was one of a kind, a force of nature, extraordinary, larger than life. A legend, a bright light, the brightest light. Exciting to see, could light up a room. Stylish, the most positive, the most inclusive. Her contagious smile, to know her was to love her. My mom was born to be a mother. Susan Laurie Halprin was born January 10th, 1953, and you guessed it, her arrival was late. My grandmother said she was an easy baby, and I'm sure this comes as a surprise to no one, that when she started talking, she never stopped. The questions and the questions and the questions and the questions. She was born to mother, and to her last breath she mothered everyone she could. Her favorite pastime was mothering her mother. Her great-grandmother dubbed her Susan the Barrier, Susan the Homemaker. I looked up this term online this morning. It's defined in the Yiddish dictionary as a complimentary term for a talented, competent, energetic, especially one that gets a lot done and does it well around the house, and that was Susan. She was always cleaning, organizing, and generally bossing around the household from an early age and until the last moments of her life. Her childhood with her younger sister Tracy of blessed memory and her brother David has been described to us our whole lives. I can see it playing like a movie. Life in River Heights, living at 723 Ash Street, was idyllic. Cousins living side by sides, friends and neighbors visiting and playing all day long, coming home for lunch of tomato soup and back to school, home for dinner, and playing some more. This childhood experience shaped my mother's heart so much. So much so, it was her last wish that today she be driven past 723 Ash. In the summer, this happy life shifted to Winnipeg Beach. Mom always said the happiest times were at Winnipeg Beach. She loved going to day camp, being with her cousins and friends, and of course, her grandparents, who played a central role in her life and fostered the importance of family above all else. My mother was a nostalgic person. It wasn't enough to just talk about it. As children, we would often drive through the streets of River Heights, and she would tell us which family lived in each house, and the same at Winnipeg Beach. An annual visit to the beach late August never went by without a trip to her grandparents' cottage on Park. Although they had long since passed and there were at least 2 subsequent owners of the property, she would lead us down the front path and into the backyard, where there were concrete giants' footprints that we would marvel at. We thought this was amazing. This, of course, was followed by a trip to the artesian well. Her happiness and joy overflowed to give us these multi-generational experiences. At 18, in what would become her trademark joie de vivre and spontaneous personality, my mom hitchhiked through Europe. We always found this so impressive. On her routine, she pursued further education to become an early childhood educator. She hit the nail on the head with this decision. Anyone that knew my mom knows she had a gift with children. At the core of this was embodying the principles of Maria Montessori, treating each child with respect, talking to them as equals, never pandering, never patronizing, always creative. Her passion for her students and Jewish day school programming, coupled with her vivacious personality, left a lasting impression on her students. We still to this day have friends that refer to our mom as Miss Susan. After a brief first life in Minneapolis, my mom moved back to Winnipeg following a courtship with my father. He says he wooed her back to Winnipeg and that she forever changed his life for the better and for the finer. My mom told me that a year or 2 after the move, her grandmother exclaimed, "You really cleaned him up well." Together, our mom and dad lived a charmed life. We heard that my mom scoured the house on Girton Boulevard, took care of my bubby bee, making her a beautiful apartment, forged new friendships, spent happy times in Florida, and precious memories on Lake of the Woods. Their love story that has become the stuff of legends is that one early evening, while having a gin and tonic on the dock, my mom looked to my dad and said, "So are we going to get married or what?" The rest was history, and somewhat unconventional, but that was my mom. She lived her life authentically and in her signature style. My dad bought her a beautiful gold necklace. She would say it was the ring around her neck, and plans were made for a surprise wedding in their home. They told their families to come over for cocktails, and the rabbi and photographer were waiting. The rabbi promised to bring a tallis for the chuppah, but forgot, and my parents were married under a mohair throw, held in the corners by their siblings. The picture is amazing from this momentous day, forever etched in my mind. My dad has a big red beard and a cheery grin. My mom is tanned, gorgeous, sparkling eyes, and that signature smile. Some short years later, my mom became a mother. I was born on January 13th, days after her birthday. We would always share our birthday celebrations. And she told us over and over again, and always on our birthdays, that the high point of their lives was lying in the hospital room with a baby on their chests, finally a family, and that this was the best feeling in the world, a feeling they would never forget. My mom was a devoted mother with every fiber of her being. In just 4 years, she had 3 girls. She remembered those years as always fun. She loved the activity, even if it was frenetic. She took us everywhere, even to places we weren't necessarily welcome and parties we weren't necessarily invited to. She loved to travel with us to Florida, Cancun, and car trips to Minneapolis as young kids. She loved to dress us up. She was always looking for interesting and beautiful children's clothes, wanting to dress us much the same as how she dressed herself. Stylish, special, different, and with a hat, if possible. On raising young children, she always said it was fun. Whenever I complained about being tired or if the kids were testing my patience, she would say, "I don't know, Bailey, we all did it. We all had 3 kids." She said to Sari recently, "Someone was always going, someone was always coming. Someone was always crying, and it was fun. In 1988, my mom and dad bought our cottage on Rush Bay Road. While my dad worked during the week, my mom would man the ship by herself. Days were spent playing with friends and neighbors, picking blueberries, bingo at Falcon Lake, driving the boat to Zigzag for summer fun. We did not miss out on any opportunity. Summer life with Susan was always fun and spontaneous. With each ring of the phone, my mom would answer, "Hello, Rush Bay." My mom had high standards and high expectations. She did not inflate our ego or offer empty compliments. When we came home with a grade, she always asked what the class average was, and if necessary, where is the other 20%? She raised us to be independent and curious. She and my dad raised us as feminists to do anything we put our minds to. Our mom went above and beyond for other people. She was always helping, trying to help, and never asked for anything in return. She was a constant volunteer and encouraged us to do the same throughout our lives. Embodying a Jewish life was central to my mom. She lived by Jewish values. A friend emailed last night to say she was like our biblical Sarah with an open tent. She had an open door and an open table. Friends, friends of friends, and friends of friends of friends were always welcome. It was not uncommon to have a guest we didn't even know. Shabbat candles were lit in whatever city we happened to be in. In the past months, it was in her beautiful bedroom with her as our Shabbos queen. Our mom was more than the life of a party. She was the party. Anywhere she went, fun followed. It could be a trip to the grocery store, to cancer care, even a drive in her car. To be with her was to feel the sun shining. Our mom loved to entertain. There was no detail too small. Any theme could be executed with elegance and precision. She lived in her kitchen, big batch cooking before it was a thing, making a dozen cookie brittle or challah at a time. You never went from point A to point B with Susan. There was always a friend to pick up or something to drop off. And in the last years, that something happened to be Lake Winnipeg Goldeye. My mom ran an import-export business, much to the dismay of her family, but to the delight of her friends. She would buy tons and tons goldeye from Raymond the fisherman and distribute them to countless people. Life with my mom was fun everywhere and anywhere and with nothing. She didn't need anything but herself for an enriching experience. Toys and treats were not necessary. This is what made her an incredible grandparent. Her love was doubled and tripled with the birth of her grandchildren. Lila B was the first light of her life in 2013, the first year of her battle with cancer. They forged an unbreakable bond, like two peas in a pod. Anyone who knows Lila can see my mom woven through her. She is the image of her beloved Bobby Sue. Kind, helpful, bubbly, and so social. When Asher and Miles were born, we would often talk about the boys. What do we know from boys? How did this happen? She loved playing with Asher. She fed into his fun-loving and silly personality. She loved taking him to Bubbies and Babies, and delighted when he would drive down Wellington Crescent and say, "That's my synagogue." When Miles was born 1 year ago, my mom was struggling again in treatment, but that didn't stop her. It pushed her even more. Miles Rubin spent his first 3 most cuddly months on her chest. In the last week, they would be cheek to cheek. She would wrap her hands around his head and say, "Oh, I love you so much." Her eyes lit up when the kids came in. She had a sense when the kids were in the room and a huge smile on her face, and we could feel her love. My mom was ecstatic about Sari and Scott's new arrival this summer. She named the baby 4, as in fourth grandchild. Her hands would gravitate to Sari's belly and she would say, "It's just incredible, it's incredible." She put all of her love into that tummy. Mom's love for her grandchildren filtered to our friends' children and her friends' grandchildren. She had special relationships with so many beautiful kids in many cities all over the world, many of whom affectionately called her Bubby Sue. Mom felt like the newest Leipzig generation was an extension of her grandchildren. Our mom was a people person. She formed special bonds with so many people. Our house phone was always ringing, and we had 2 lines. Mom embraced FaceTime before FaceTime was trendy or really even socially acceptable. It became our family's preferred mode of communication multiple times a day, at work, even in the bathtub. Our friends, her friends, my grandma's friends were recipients of these special calls. It happened more than once that we would be out with friends and one of our friends would receive a FaceTime call from our mom. I would call my mom every single morning on the way to school with the kids. We always heard a cheery "Ola Ola Coca-Cola" or Boker Tov on the other end. Oftentimes we would sing a song all the way to school. We spoke to my mom countless times a day, more times than some people speak to their parents in a week. I will miss these calls for the rest of my life. Her voice gave us strength and a direction at so many juncture points during the day. My mom had a rare natural beauty and a signature style. She could look elegant in her bathrobe. She loved bright lipstick, and she could apply it with precision without a mirror. She wore eyeglasses with flair, loved a hat, and her smile was everything she needed to make an outfit. She dressed for herself. She did not want to look like everybody else, and she encouraged us to do the same. She loved theater, concerts, and sought out the arts and culture in every city she traveled to. If she went to a great restaurant or show, she was sure to tell everyone in her orbit and encourage them to do the same. She and my dad loved to travel. I remember when they took the 3 of us to London and Paris. We 3 girls were floored by the time difference. While my parents spent their entire first day in London walking and revisiting their favorite spots, we slept. In Paris, we would flake out after a long day of sightseeing, but not our parents. Their night would continue. I remember going back to check if they were in yet. They were like the teenagers, and we were like the parents. Trips to New York were the highlight in the calendar year for our parents. A dream of my mom's was to take Lila to her first Broadway show. I'm so grateful that we accomplished that. For her 5th birthday, we spent 4 magical days in NYC. We saw Frozen on Broadway. One night around 10 p.m., the latest Lila had ever stayed up, my mom walked around Times Square with Lila on her shoulders. Felt like a dream, with the bright lights like fireworks in the background. My mom dealt with cancer for 7 years. There were frightening periods and countless setbacks, but she found the joy in between. She lived her life like Susan. She'd always say, "I'm well, thanks." She continued organizing, baking, bossing people around, inviting, and traveling when she could. She was the recipient of her kindness in the last few years. It came full circle. Her friends lifted her up. They pushed her to live. She used every last bit of energy to connect with her friends. She tried so hard to sing to her loved ones over FaceTime and be there for us. She could and should have lived forever. She had so much more goodness to spread, so many more people to pick up and love. She said to me a few months ago that soon we won't be able to love each other. And I told her that our love is eternal. I made a promise to Sari and Julie that we will never stop talking about my mom, so that their children will feel like they knew their Bubby. So she has a lasting impression on our families. Please help us to accomplish this. There is so much more that can be said and has to be said about our mom. Yesterday morning, when I came back to my house, I made a cookie riddle with the kids. It was Asher's suggestion. And as we were pressing it into the pan, Lila said to Asher, "Do it like Bubby." And I found myself repeating, "Be like Bubby. Be like Bubby. Be kind to people. Be a Susan. Just be a Susan. Be a Susan." Lila interrupted me to say, say, "Mom, how many words is that?" My mother's legacy is her kindness and goodness, always and even in adversity. She taught us to be more, to do more, to cook more, to help more, to be a Susan.
Thank you, everyone, again, for your beautiful words of eulogy and the strength you've shown by delivering them so eloquently and so genuinely today. Bailey, Sari, Brian, Carrie, thank you. In a moment, we will recite the words of the El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer. In it, we will call Susan by her Hebrew name, Sarah Leah. In this family, after all, middle names are very important. And I love the description of the friend who sent the message that Susan is like our biblical Sarah, with her open tent, the epitome of hospitality. But even more so, we get two for the price of one, as she is both Sarah and Leah, two of the four matriarchs in our tradition, captured in a single person's name. We have a concept in Jewish tradition that we should benefit all these centuries and millennia later from the merit of our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. That we can call on God now to be granted forgiveness or whatever the situation may call because of the merit of our fathers and mothers. We who knew Susan have benefited and will continue to benefit from her merit. The El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim shochein bamromim Hamsei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina b'malot kedoshim utehorim kezohar harakia masirim and nishmat Sarah Leah bar Ruvain veli Naomi shelcha leolama began Eden tehei menuchata anabal harachamim Hastirei habeseter kenafecha leolamim utzror bitzror achayim enishmata Adonai hu nachalata v'tanuach b'shalom Amishkava Benomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Susan Halprin, Sarah Leah bar Ruvain veli Naomi, the daughter of Reuven Kenneth and Elise, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that she find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. In a moment we'll recite the words of the mourner's Kaddish. And then we have our final ritual, which is to shovel dirt into the grave. This is a mitzvah, a righteous act which we do without any hope of reward. With this act, we take on the responsibility of caring for our loved one until the very end. Because we believe strongly in Judaism, our loved ones deserve to be buried by kind and knowing hands, though they may be sorrowful hands, hands that once held their hands. The family will lead us, and others who are here, we ask that you're mindful of keeping distance and taking turns. We invite everyone to participate in this mitzvah. We recognize it is a painful act. However, it is one born of love and compassion for someone who meant so much to so many people. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach yehi shem Adonai mevorach. The words of Job. God you have given, God you have taken away, blessed be the name of God. May Susan's memory be a blessing, as we mark that her essence will never leave our hearts and our souls. The Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekudsha berichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom